Rolling.
Alright, so I took my hub down to a friend of mine's shop. He has a little welder. I don't weld, so I had him do this. And the bearings are pressed. You know, these bearings here, they're pressed into this hub. So the only way to get them out is a little bit of magic. You know, you can beat them out, you can try to get a bar in there and press them, or you can use a press. Some places have a press, they'll just press them out. But I don't have a press. So what I had him do is I had him weld a bead with his little welder in several places all around the inside of the race here, the bearing race, the old bearing race is no good. And then once you do that, it weakens the metal. You can see where it weakens the metal, it weakens its tensile strength. And it also, because you're welding beads on one side of it all the way around, it also kind of draws it inwards a little bit. So it's just enough when you do that it'll come right out with you. So we did that on both sides. That's the other bearing for the other side. We did that on both sides, and all we did was the bearing. We didn't get inside the hub here and hit the hub. And when we got done, we just took a little punch and smacked it one time, and it just fell right out. So, you know, if we hadn't done that first, it would have been a heck of a time trying to get them out, you know, without a press. So that's how we got them out. It was fairly easy. And then I took it and I cleaned it up. I know it's not perfectly clean, but you know, I cleaned it up enough where we can heat it up, got all the grease and the grime and the oil off of it, anything else that might have been on there. And now what I'm doing is I'm taking an old file and I'm deburring this. I don't know if you want to see in here. Mm-hmm. This is where the bearing sits. Here is where the bearing sits. Here, where this step is, where it's press fit. And then of course it shoulders against this piece here. And what we want to do is we want to deburr it. You know, we want to make sure there's no burrs. You can see there's a high spot right there. We want to make sure we get all the high spots out of it so that it sits nice and flat. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it needs to be pretty close. So I'm going to just play with this, file this down a little bit. I'm not going to really take anything off of it. I'm just going to file it enough to take the burrs out and smooth it up good, clean it up really good. Because we're going to heat this thing up. We're going to heat this hub up to 400 degrees. We're going to take these bearings right here. These bearings will go in it. And we're going to take these races and we're going to put these in a freezer. And we're going to freeze these down to about 0 degrees Fahrenheit. I got a freezer out there, and I got a freezer in my refrigerator. So what I'll do is I'll freeze these, and then we'll heat this up to 400 degrees. And I'm going to use my oven, because that's all I have. You want to see that? Show that. And my wife hopefully won't find out.
Oh, she knows.
She already knows. Now we're going to bake a cake with the hub.
It does look like a cake.
Yeah, it's a cake.
Like a robot cake.
So, when we heat that up to 400 degrees and we shrink this, this will shrink, this will expand, and we'll be able to just drop this bearing right in. And once this warms up and this cools off, it'll seal, and then it'll be shrink fit again. I've done this a couple of times. I can tell you this, when you heat the hub up, you want to get the hub itself to 400 degrees. So you want to, you know, if you're going to use an old kitchen stove or a kitchen stove like I'm going to do, I set the stove on like 450, and then I monitor it with a temp gun. You know, I got one of these laser, here it is, got one of these laser temp guns, and I just, you know, when it gets to 400, it's perfect. And when I do one of these, and I drop the bearing in, you set the hub down like this, you drop the bearing in, okay, and then if the hub, sometimes when the hub gets warm, it'll distort a little bit. If it's old, there's a possibility. Or it could be perfect, and you can set this in, it'll fall right in. But if it's distorted a little bit, it still won't quite go in. It still won't quite go in easily. So you'll have to take something and then just gently tap it and bring it in. The amount of time with this frozen and this at 400 degrees that you have is probably 40 seconds maybe. a minute, and then after about 2 minutes, by the time you get to 2 minutes or so, if you don't have it in there all the way, you're done. So make sure you're prepared to put this thing all the way in right away. That means you need to deburr it. You need to make sure it's clean. Nothing's going to get in your way. Nothing's going to keep it from seating all the way down. You know, you need to have some gloves on, obviously, because it's going to be really hot. And then you need to be prepared to make sure that thing sits all the way down. So that means a little hammer and maybe a piece of brass or the old bearing. I don't recommend using the old bearing to tap it down. Because what happens, and I've done this, what happens if you use the old bearing to tap it down is you tap it down and then you get it all the way in, and then the old bearing gets stuck in there because it expands too. So, and it's kind of a pain to get out afterwards. Now you got a new bearing with an old bearing stacked against it, and you're trying to bang it out, and it's just not good. So I use a piece of brass. So let me go get my brass, a little piece of brass, and my little hammer. It doesn't take a lot of force, really. It should just fall in, and most time they do. But I've had a couple of hubs where it kind of stretches. You know, when it's hot, it's a little bit out around, just a tiny bit, just enough that you have to coax it in there. So I thought I'd say that up front so that you're not sitting there with a hub following my, you know, if you're following what I'm doing, which, you know, you're on your own with that, but if you happen to be, you know, trying this yourself, and then you got this thing in the oven, and then you take it out, and then you're having trouble putting the bearing in, you know, don't get yourself in trouble like that. So just be totally prepared to do the job when that thing's hot. So, and any contingencies. So, let me go get my my little hammer and a little piece of, you know, I got a piece of brass that I use to tap things around with. It's, you know, soft brass. And I'm going to also clean this hub up and get this all nice and clean in here. I'm not going to take out any aluminum. I'm not going to open it up, grind it out. I'm just going to deburr it, and I'm going to clean it really well to make sure that I don't have any trouble putting it in. Cut.
Okay.
Alright, I'm going to use this little rounded file. I'm just deburring it, making sure there's no reason for that bearing not to go straight down in there when it's hot, when this hub is hot. Just making sure there's no reason for it to get hung up. Nice and smooth. Now, I didn't file this edge right here shiny. It was already like that. I'm just deburring it. I'm just making sure there's no burrs on this edge. I can fill them with the file if there is. So far it's not too bad. It feels pretty good. And down here, and I got a little small file to get down here real nice and flat. Finish deburring this thing really good. That bearing needs to sit really flat against here. What I do is when I get the bearing in, when I drop the bearing in and everything, you should be able to turn it. It'll actually be free in there until it seats. And I always work it a little bit, and then after it's down, I take a little mirror. After it's down, I'll take a little mirror, like a little piece of mirror, and I'll put in there, and I'll look to see in this joint between the bottom of this and the top of this. You know, I'll look down here to see the joint with a little tiny mirror all the way around to make sure that this thing is not sitting crooked, or, you know, there's no gap. So that's important too when you go to put it together, because you're gonna do this all at once with it hot. So, you know, be prepared for all that. So I guess I got to get my mirror too. Oh, here's my hammer and my my little brass thing, so I can tap it if I need to. So let me finish cleaning this hub up. I'll go grab a mirror and we'll put it in the oven, and we'll bake us a cake, a hub cake. Yay! All right, the bearings that go in my ProStar, every one of these, you know, hubs and bearings and all these trucks are different. But the ones that go in my particular ProStar, the bearings, I don't know, it's a If you want to zoom in on that, you can see the back, the bearing in the rear is bigger than the bearing in the front. You can see, and the rear bearing is this height.
Hit set.
Height set, I don't know, 429, and this one's a height set 430. Okay, and I'm not sure, but I think that C14B means it's a match set. I'm not sure, but I always try to get a match set of bearings. Sometimes you can get away without match sets, but I try to get a match set, you know, that they're the same age and the same precision and everything. How did I know the old bearing was bad? When I took it apart, I forgot to video that. Here's the new bearing. Okay, I don't know if you can see that real well in the light. You can see the rollers are nice and shiny, and there's no scarring on here. Here's the old bearing. You can see that this bearing is seriously starting to fall apart. It hasn't seized up yet, but if I would have let it go much longer, it would have seized up and it would have caused some damage. So that's how I knew the bearing was bad when I pulled it apart. I think I forgot to video that. So anyways, let me get back to, I cleaned the one side, now I flipped it over. I'm going to deburr and clean the other side and get it ready. So we'll do that and we'll come back. Cut.